Harry. We're really excited to be presenting Phill, my one-man band Wilson, tonight with his new software, which he will tell you all about because I don't understand. So Harry is a space for experimentation, artist research and public engagement. So we're really excited to have Phill here today because this exemplifies exactly what we're passionate about as well. Letting people have space to explore and providing an arena for people to connect and share their research and experimentation. And we hope that some of you are going to help with that experimentation later today. So I'm not going to say very much more because as I say, I don't understand the tech side of things. But we've been doing a few sound art events recently. And we're really excited. Sound art seems to be one of the most experimental, one of the most kind of rich playgrounds for artists at the moment. So yeah, we're looking forward to many more events to come. But for now, please welcome Phill, my one-man band, Wilson.
Thank you very much. Wait a minute. That'll help. Well, help sometimes, I can't do that, Andrew. Hi, thank you all for coming. And thanks for all waiting downstairs whilst we got over a few technical hiccups that may or may not have involved me having all this lot over on the floor 10 minutes before I was supposed to open. Yeah, so my name's Phill, and I perform under the name of my one-man band. I've been working on this D2MS thing for the last year. I'll tell you more about it in a second. I thought we'd start with just a quick demonstration. That's not a good start. That's a bad start. So basically this is Rhythmic Futures, and this is hopefully a tool for advancing augmented drumming. So let's start at the beginning. So basically this whole process has been facilitated by my dear friend Elliot and myself. It was an idea that I came up with, and I decided to try and work with this idea of combining acoustic sounds, acoustic drums, but with the possibility to play a melody. And Elliot is a guy in California who's great at programming and he's an all-round lovely guy, and he sort of helped me make my dream come true, sort of thing. He kind of here tonight for obvious reasons. So basically, just to give you a bit of background, so I've obviously formed under the name I One Man Band for quite a lot of years, just making improvised electronic music, normally using synthesizers, sequencers, samples, that kind of thing, or VSs, which may come into play with the name. And around 2020, I got the idea that I wanted to try and take up drums. It was sort of just after the pandemic. It was a pandemic idea, but we were moving at the time, so it took until after that to get around to actually doing something with it. So I got the drums, and my dear friend Sam Jones told me, how long is it until you start turning it into synths? And I said, oh, no, I'm going to play straight acoustic music for a change. I'm not going to do loops and stuff. And after about sort of 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks of doing that, I kind of found that. So I started cobbling together a lot of different sequencers and samplers, and triggering them initially just with a a pretty non-custom tool that would just allow me to, each time I hit it, it would just step advance by one along a random pattern, which was enough to kind of give me this idea. So just going back to that previous slide, has anyone heard of Andre Jerusalem? Yay! If you haven't, I really do say you should check it out, because Andre is very much sort of the artist who put me on this road, and before I could ever actually play the drums or come up with ideas like this. So he, years and years ago, was using a computer and a Node sequencer to play chiptune music, where he could kind of split it all into parts and step through it with his drums. So yeah, if any of this is in any way your kind of thing, and I assume it is since you're here, then I'd say check out Andre, because he's definitely he's the boss. He's the guy who put me on this road to start with. So anyway, so I've been struggling with the previous slides worth of weird hardware and kind of making a hacky job of hitting drums and making random melodic sounds. But at the same time, I bought the Norms grid here. That's live, by the way. So yeah, so if you've not come across Norms, it's a really, really interesting project from the Monome community. Norms was officially a product in itself, but then they made a Shield version which can be put onto a Raspberry Pi. So for anyone who is interested in getting into this, it's kind of a really interestingly low barriers to entry. It depends on whether you want to go for a full product and you just want to buy something, or you want to buy one pre-assembled. There's people who make them and sell them on things like eBay, or you can literally order the component level parts and put it together yourself. And the same with the grid here. So that's, yeah, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to do it on this particular piece of hardware. Is I don't really like using computers in the traditional sense in my own music. I like the idea of sort of one function at a time. I find that's kind of, it helps with the creativity of things for myself personally. So I decided to try and use the forum lines, which is kind of a community where all the people who design scripts for this hardware hang out, and I thought I would go online and just kind of see if I could do a bit of a recruitment drive or find someone to help me. So what I decided to do was create a virtual manual. I had this idea that I knew I couldn't code yet, and I knew it was going to be a lot of effort and years to probably get the jobs to do that. But I thought the easiest way to try and consolidate the idea in my mind was to actually write it as if it already did exist, and write a full manual of how, if that did exist, how I would use it. So I had the grid layout, and I decided to kind of try and get this idea of how it would function. The manual was much more than this. It was pages and pages of data. I put it on lines, and within a few days I got my first contact from Elliot, who basically, again, like I said, most lovely man, he just kind of came out of nowhere and said like, hey, I think, it's an interesting idea, it's been stuck in my head, I've started working on something, no bother if you don't want to pursue it with me, but I'd quite like to collaborate if you fancy it, see if we can work something out. So for me, this solved the main thing, which is I'm not a coder, and although I was managing to get buttons individually turned on and off, I wasn't going much beyond that at that point. And so I said, that's amazing, let's collaborate, let's work together, and really the rest is history. So the reason we're doing this today is today actually marks a year of this project, a year since that message. So we kind of deliberately tried to time that, because it's just a nice little circle of what a year's worth of development can get you. Actually, as a matter of interest, what a year of development can get you is nearly 2,000 messages. We found out that after 500, the forum closes the message set, and we're just approaching our 4th message set. So yeah, that's a lot of back and forth, considering we also made the meeting video. So basically between us we've come up with D2MS, which, as it initially stood for drums to MIDI synths, but realistically you can use this with sequencers, samplers, and a lot of other things within the S. So drums to MIDI stuff. And it's an augmented toolkit for controlling anything via USB and MIDI using velocity and gestures. So, anyway, So the grid is this bit at the bottom of the screen here, and I'll do my best to try and kind of explain as we go along. The layout of the grid was really the thing that I felt like the idea would kind of rise or fall on to some extent, because all these buttons are identical. You can light them at different brightnesses, but other than that, there's no markings, there's no sort of knobs and encoders or anything that you can kind of stencil or get an idea. So it all had to make sense in and of itself. I just realised that's upside down. That's going to be problematic, but never mind. Yeah. So that camera is going that way, so yeah, that's, never mind. A bit late to change that now. So the top, or the bottom on the screen, we've got 4 track lane areas here, and that's the place where the notes go into. So what we've basically got is the ability to have like a 16-step sequencer, kind of similar to how like 808 or any of the kind of famous drum machines work. You've got a 16-step of individual note data that when it reaches the end, it then comes back to the start at the other side and repeats. So my initial idea was basically, wouldn't it be nice to be able to like fill these up with like either random notes or with specific notes? And what we decided to do was basically have a piano at the bottom. So I decided quite early on that I wanted this to be something that was constrained to a scale, because then that kind of lowers the bar for entry, and then it's something that I work with a lot of my other electronic music tools. So basically what I wanted was something where you could pick a scale and have that kind of map across this piano at the bottom there. I'm going to use the top one, we'll just ignore this bottom one for now. So basically if I just start with a nice simple C major, just slightly less of this, that's better. C major scale, but just as easy you could go to something a bit weird like melodic minor in C sharp. And you've got two octaves here, and you've got at the end there, you've got 2 little octave buttons, a bit like on a regular keyboard, so you can jump between them. So I also, because of how I started with this, using like another product called the MIDI-Seek V4, that was a lot less controllable and had a lot more random features, which I did quite like. So we built this higher section above the piano, the little group of 10. Those are all random gestures. We call these fills. So basically, at any time, you can hold one of those buttons, which do things like fill upwards notes, fill notes going upwards then downwards, fill but only from 1 octave, fill going upwards but not every sequential note, and so on, and true random. And you can just dump that by holding one, pressing another, and you basically have a random fill of notes that I can then dump another one in. So to me, that was sort of a great starting point. It let me iterate really quick for kind of trying to come up with guided ideas that are sort of semi-random, but then being able to hone them by actually, you can either hone a particular note and then hit some trigger areas, which should have given me the 3 notes in there, or we actually have like a live play feature where I can kind of do like a, let's just go up to it. So yeah, so basically it leaves it up to you as to whether you want to have quick, random iterations of things, or whether you want to be, meticulous in your songwriting. Both options are there. One of the other things we came up with quite early was the idea of what we've called the brackets gesture. So the idea is basically you hold down one finger where you'd like the bracket to open, and then you use the second finger where you'd like the bracket to close. And what happens is a track lane kind of moves in to just contain those notes. Because often with this particular type of music, you don't actually need that many notes to make the song, particularly things like bass notes and what have you. You might just want to hold on them for quite a long time, so you can have maybe a full verse or a chorus with just, if you think of those more as chord changes or things like that, rather than just singular notes. So that's with that little that option there. Then the other thing we've got on this particular page, you've also got different directions. So obviously forwards self-evident, backwards is backwards, but then you've got interesting things where you can do ping pongs, inverted ping pongs, random steps. Which, like I said, takes you into territory where just a few notes with an interesting pattern behind it can be enough to kind of work almost like an arpeggiation. So yeah, that's the short version of that page. Ooh, I broke it down further. Trebles, piano, other stuff. Machine context. So, this was basically further on in the development, we decided that we needed to have a succinct way to decide what's going where. So what we did was we reused this top half of the track lane to represent 16 MIDI channels. So it means that you can quite quickly and freely assign what goes where. So at the minute, I've got that weird one that's not playing, but if I move that to, that's with it on channel 2, we'll put it on to channel 3. So you can quickly change instruments just by changing the MIDI channels. And at the minute, just to let you know, I'm sending this to an iPad. I found that the iPad just is a nice, simple way of amassing a lot of synths and drum machines all in a portable package. But you could literally send this to anything. You could send it to modular, you could send it to something like your Chord Electrive, where you've got a similar thing but in a hardware form, like multiple tracks, or you can have it sent to a MIDI router and then sent out to 16 individual full-size keyboard synths or drum machines or whatever. It's really up to you. I've just kind of centered mine around the iPad just because it's nice and portable and kind of offers a nice succinct memory. I'm actually using the app Gadget, which is a really useful app for that because it's kind of nice walled garden with a lot of options but not too many options, which is it's useful for this kind of thing because you kind of tend to run off. So yeah, so the other thing we've got down at the bottom top as you're looking here, these two little notes here, these are what we call intervals. So basically, the keyboard has a native octave which you can move up or down, but because you might want to have things offset from that, the interval lets you basically raise and lower the interval of that by an offset of any positive or negative number. So what that means is you can kind of drop a bass line a lot lower, or you can, so that's it in that octave lower, that's it, it's native octave. So it's a quick way to be able to put things where you want it. And also, you don't have to drop it by a full octave. So what you can often have is a lot of things that are all playing using a related track. So they're joined at the track, they're all reading that same track data, but they have different intervals. So that's, again, it's a quick system where you can set up quite complicated sort of subroutines going within that, because they're all playing at an interval that is harmonically related, but like unique to that particular drum. So yeah, so just to explain the track lane and input system a little bit more. What we've got here at the bottom, where you've got the 4, so you've got kind of 8 and then 8, and you've got a little higher lit part in the 4. Those are 16 inputs, so we decided that 16 was enough, and an input can be anything. I'm using piezo triggers that are just regular, normal drum triggers. I know that there are other technologies out there that are like more complicated, but I quite like the simplicity of these ones. So these are just regular piezos. I have kind of two playing surfaces called two piezos per pickup. So you've got the head of the drum, and you've also got the rim of the drum. You can have different sounds on two different surfaces, which we'll get to in a second. So basically mine at the moment has sort of 8 potential inputs, but I could add on a drum pad or a MIDI controller or foot pedals or anything really that sort of spits out MIDI, and then expand it that way, which can be useful for some of the features that are more non-drumming, which we'll get to later. So basically those are your inputs. So then moving up from input, each input has, in that layer above, each input has 5 layers. So this was an idea of wanting to do things split by all sorts of things. So wanting to split by dynamics, like how hard you're hitting, or wanting to have a second layer that you can bring in by using, for instance, like an auxiliary drum, or sort of tapping a rim. I might want to bring in a second instrument. So the idea is that these layers all exist separately to each other, and each of them has its own 16 MIDI notes that it can send on, and it has its own track lines. Actually, one thing I forgot to mention on the previous page, over on the right here, where you've just got the single dot and then 3 empty ones. These are pages. So these are 3 completely separate sets of 4 track lanes. So each track lane has 16 steps, up to 16 steps, and each track lane is unique to that particular layer. So I haven't done maths on that, but that's a lot of track lanes, a lot of options for how that works. So it basically means that you could have 2 different sounds running on exactly the same note data, or you could have 2 things running like harmonic counterpoint just by changing that track lane data, so they were pointing at 2 different places. So this was a concept that we've kind of evolved over time. It sounds a bit more complicated than it is. When you get a feel for it, it's actually quite straightforward. It's basically just a case of deciding how many different phrases your piece is going to have, and putting each of those on different track lanes, sort of thing. So basically, going through the machines, I think I've got a little. Oh, there we go. So we came to the machine basic, which is the one you've heard so far. So that's basically just basically. So that's just running straight through a track lane using whatever method and direction we've set it up. I would say that's kind of the most basic, the most sort of normal starting point for a track. So other track machines that we've got a riff machine. So the idea of the riff machine was, there's times particularly for like your bass line where you might want something to stay still, so you can like repeatedly hit the drum and not have it playing different notes every time. So the riff machine lets you either just select one note, like that. I'm just going to change that to something a little bit less obnoxious. Everything's got a ton of reverb. Interesting. Never mind. I think it might be on the PA. We'll leave that be for now. So yeah, single note, so a riff of one note only, but you could then set different intervals for the second. You've got up to 8 notes in your riff, and you can basically use that little 2-finger gesture, same as moving the track lengths to different values, so you can kind of brackets around any amount of as an example. We'll do some more examples later in the context of actual performances. Chord, let's just go through these. So chord is our next one. So that's sort of it uses this space here. So again, this little black space in the centre, we've named that the meta, because it's kind of metatextual depending on what machine you're using. So the meta here has another 8 steps that in this context lets you add notes to fire at the same time. So to make chordal stuff. So again, one is just going to sound the same as the other. But if we pick something, there we go. If I add in a second one and make that an octave higher. And we can have, again, this is where having the sort of offsets comes in. So if I add like a second, start to get chords, we can get jazzy and put like a 7th on the end of there. And I can, I've got like a little feature there where I can kind of strum it rather than have them all hit at the same time. It sounds awful on that chord, but it can sound nice on other chords. Right, moving through. So this is one of the ones that was kind of, I did ask a few people really early days for some feedback, and one of the things that everybody seemed to really want was velocity to note. So being able to like hit it harder and have that interpreted into different notes. So the way we decided to handle that was we basically use the note lane and the fills to be able to, you can have everything from a melodic scale going where every note's in there just by using the fill ascending, or you can have it so that you've got gaps, because you don't necessarily always need every note in the scale, so you can kind of choose your own, and of course you can play it in, so you can play in exactly the notes that you want to hear as you hit harder, going over as many octaves as you want. So let's just try to pick something. There we go. So, I start bringing my first jumplet. That kind of thing. So, that's that one. Fixed notes. So fixed notes is basically a way of dealing with drums and drum racks where you aren't going to want to have different notes firing every time. You're going to want specific notes that are referencing a kick drum or a snare or whatever. So fixed notes started life as like one fixed note on a fixed note machine, and then we decided we have this meta space that we've been talking about. So we now have up to 8 notes that you can then choose how they get dynamically switched between, so you can use things like velocity to go between them, or probability, you can have it random, or you can have them going in round robin, so it's quite useful, particularly if you have like a full rack of just snare hits at different velocities, you can have it so it feels very natural. Actually, I forgot to mention, everything is also velocity to velocity sensitive, so you can set it up so that lighter hits quieter than hard hits. Right. Strum. So strum is one that I'll show you later in the context of a patch. Strum is basically just very, very useful. We started it with just, it was almost like an accident. I was playing lead Elfie, and the piezo itself kept feeding back, which was creating these kind of runs of notes, which was really, really annoying when that's not what I wanted, but I thought it was a useful feature, so we actually put strum into it so you can like hit one drum and get it to kind of quickly run through, almost like a heart being played, that kind of thing. But we more recently found out if you slow that down quite a lot, you can create like cool riff sounding things that go great on bass lines. So we've added re-triggering to that, so you can kind of keep re-triggering that same riff. And there's more work to be done on that one, where it's best to show that in context. Ratchet is quite a simple one. It's just basically means that you can like hit a particular velocity and it'll play the same note over and over again. So that one is one where we realise as we're stacking these layers, you don't want two steps to be played because you've got two machines on them. So follow is basically like it's a layer that will play a note, but it won't necessarily advance the step. So on one hand, it means you can have a set drum, almost like a drone note, so you can like just keep hitting it, or you can have it paired with a pacing machine or a chord machine or whatever, so that when one note moves it moves forwards as well. Advanced is kind of the opposite. So advanced is basically a machine that doesn't make any sound but does move the step forward, which again, that's really good for controlling tracks. And one of the things that's it'll become more clear with the examples. One of the things that's quite useful is basically you can use one drum to control a different drum's track advancement. So it doesn't have to be hitting the bass drum that makes the bass sound go forward. You can kind of have it so it stays on one note until you hit an auxiliary drum and then it moves the step forward. That's the end of those ones. So next bit, trig context. I'll try and get through these as quick as possible. I'm sorry, it's one of them where you realise how much you put into it. So trig contexts. We have another layout. It basically on this one, that top bit is a replication of the bottom. So where you've got channel inputs and layers, you've got the channel inputs and layers again. So you're basically selecting, I want this trig at the bottom to affect this drum or this layer at the top. So it's kind of quite a quick way to iterate trigs. So our definition of trigs is basically things that aren't notes. So things that aren't advancements of tracks and that sort of thing. So these are sort of mechanical things that happen behind the scenes to make your music more interesting. I won't go through examples, I'll just read them off here. So basically A B machine and A B prime lets you switch between an A part and a B part. So we kind of thought, what's a quick way to iterate an idea of a verse and a chorus? So basically you create an A part, which can be it can be 16 steps, but would normally be sort of less than 16 steps, like 8 would be ideal, or 4 for an A part, and then you can hit something on here to change your B part, where you have like another 8 steps, or 4, 2, or whatever. So that's a great way to quickly move between verses and choruses. A prime is exactly the same, it just basically waits until the next input comes, because the AB one actually sort of triggers a note itself, whereas AB prime kind of waits until another auxiliary drum performs the next step. Direction basically means that I can select when I hit something on this drum, I want this sequence of what's playing forwards to play backwards, for instance, or random, or whatever. The layer switch, that's quite a complicated one. Basically, the quickest way to explain it is, if you wanted to have a crescendo where more instruments come in, you kind of set it up using layer switches, so that in your A section, you'll maybe only have like 4 channels of MIDI data going, and in your B section, the layer switch means that 4 more instruments join them or replace them or whatever. So it's quite dynamic. You can have them so one supersedes the other, or it can sort of add to the other. And they can be completely different machines. So you can have a single note on the A section and a chord machine on the B section. So there's a lot of options there. The reset machine, it basically means that any time that data is triggered, everything resets, or everything that's put into that trigger resets to 1. So it's a quick way of, if you get into a bit of a problem where you're a little bit out of time or whatever, you can hit the reset machine and everything goes back to step 1. So it's just kind of a function. Phill, that's one way you can basically change the random note data dynamically. So you can have like a pattern on one of your drums and hit the fill trig, and it will refill that note lane with new data. So it'll stay in the same key, the same scale, and so on, with the same amount of steps. But yeah, you can dynamically get it to reassign new notes, which is really good for kind of particular things that are like, there's a common arpeggio going or something. You can just have your underlying notes change whilst you're banging out the same arpeggio. Sustain, basically any trig type can have a sustain, so it doesn't send a note off, it just stays permanently, so there's always a note engaged, and that lets you to toggle that on or off. The MIDI CC, how many of you are familiar with MIDI, just so I can get a sort of vague idea? I'll give you the super basic one, but basically CCs are controlling things. So the typical example of that would be things like acid house, where you get that filter kind of squelchiness coming out. That can be done with a CC to control that knob. So it's basically like a virtual hand tweaking that knob up and down. So when you use a CC machine, it's like an extra pair of hands that, by the dynamics of your drum, can add reverb or take it away, change filter, cut off frequencies, increase volume, anything really. So that's that one. And then we have root and scale. So again, you can dynamically switch between a major and a minor. This is one that we're going to explore further in the V2, but the concept at the minute is just if you wanted to do something quite jazzy that had like relative major and minor being played concurrently, you could use the scale to kind of switch with dynamics to change whether you're in the major version or the minor version, for instance, or you could move up with the Britney Spears thing, go to a different root note and just have the same thing but transfers up or down. And then there's auto division, auto length, which to be honest, they're not finished yet, so we'll skip over those ones. Right, that's CC context, so I think yeah, that matches that. So the idea there, this is a more detailed place for you to put together all your CCs. It's quite detailed, so I won't go over it now, but suffice to say, you've got 4 MIDI CCs per channel and 4 pages of 4, so you've got 16 MIDI CCs per 16 channels. So you've got quite a lot to play with, basically. We've never run out, where processing comes out before sort of the need. That's the long and the short of the one. So, right, we'll move on to a bit of how to. So my concept for this, and I hope it makes sense, I've kind of brought up this drum kit, and what we're going to do is we're going to superimpose instruments over the top of that drum kit, which is obviously representing this drum kit, and hopefully we can kind of, there we go, see how it all fits together. So I'm just going to load up my first example. Here we go. I might have to put the microphone down now. Can you still hear me? Yeah. Hey. Probably shouldn't be doing that all along. That's a good sign. So, on this example, I'm really struggling with bass notes. Why is that? Sorry about this. Just have to bear with me 1 second whilst we try and figure out what the heck's going on there. All good fun.
Let's not demonstrate anything.
Yeah.
Just try direct contact. It's so clear at home. Whatever. Alright, we'll play without the big PA system that I went all the way to on the street back to pick up. Thanks, Joe. That seems to work alright. Never mind. So, moving on. So basically on this one, we've got the bass drum on the kick. Single piano there. That's supposed to be a harp, it's not, but we'll move on. So it's simply there. So a quick sort of version of that will be. So that's your most basic introduction, that's how basic sequences work. It's just all the notes going forward. That's I put it to there so you can kind of see advancing on the bottom. When it gets to the back, it repeats again. This high focus just means that that's the track that I want to touch and play. So, example 2. There'll be a little bit of loading for all of these, I'm afraid. The good thing is I can edit all that out. It looks really nice. So on this one, we've still got the bass line there. Now I've changed the velocity so that the velocity has to be more than 60 to play a note for my piano, which means that I can play quite and that can be set really quickly. So basically, you just on the track lane, just hold down the layer that you want to set a velocity for, and hit the drum according to it. And now I've made that a bit harder. So that's quite quick to assign. It's useful in the gig when it's going to be a lot louder. Up at the top there, we've got our harp, which is naturally a harp this time. And this time we've added a toy piano. So the idea on this one is we're using 2 different track lanes. So you'll hear how now, rather than it being like on this one, that was supposed to be 2 different velocities, but maybe I'm not going to. On this one, 2 different track lanes, so what that basically means is 2 different counterpoint parts can be run at the same time. Let me just check out that velocity there. 1 second. Velocity 1. We'll carry on, but yeah, so again, concept of that one will be that's all then. Moving on. I've got 10 of these, by the way, just so you got a vague idea as to whether we're ever going to finish. Example 3. Don't delete it. So we can save essentially an infinite amount of these. So again, it's quite useful as a user. You can either create basic structures that you paint different things into it every time. I like to think of concepts of sort of gardens of sounds. Like you can kind of create a garden of how everything's sort of set out. You can leave the notes until the last minute and quite quickly iterate that with the randomization and just quickly play some things in. Anyway, so on this one, we've now started to introduce some trigs and chords. So what we've got on this one, put it over to there. Can you see how we're moving at the bottom there? I can move between an A section and a B section. So. Dynamically on playback. We've also got chords. So I've kind of tried to represent rim shots with these bits that are pointing upwards. So individual single notes, and then for the same instrument, chords. Bit unbalanced sound-wise, but it would basically mean you could play both hands with one instrument if you wanted, virtually. Any other business? A, B's, chords. No, I think we're good. So moving on. Example 4. So this one is the concept of the leader pointer. So the leader pointer is basically, if you don't want each track lane to have its own track lane, you can say, I want this instrument to have a different track lane. So we use the leader pointer to say, follow this other track lane. So the minute the floor tom is following the basic note that the riff machine is using as its sort of zero tom. So what it means is that that riff will stay until I hit, and then the riff will move along with the sustained notes off the floor tom, which is my keyboard instrument there. So each one. I've also got one of them little reset tricks I said. So it basically means that every time I hit this drum, it resets this riff to 1 just to make sure that we're always playing from the root note, essentially. That was the strum. Weirdly, that doesn't sound like a harp, that definitely sounds like a piano, but never mind. So that's quite nice, just for a little extra. I've got sustain on as well, I can tell that. I don't think I bothered to put the sustain off function, so there you go again. And then on my little tongue drum there, I've got that set to the velocity instrument, so it means that the harder I play, see if that lack of a sustain off screws anything up. That's a good sign. That's a good sign. Right. What have we got on this one? So I'm kind of this one. The concept I was trying to get across is we've got more combinations now. So we've got an A-B machine there. By the way, you don't have to have an annoying sound. That's just something I must have left in there. That should just be silent. We've got our synthesizer playing at the harder than 60 velocity, and a +1 octave version on the rig. Some chords there that theoretically are connected, and another riff machine set to follow. So again, all these drums across the toms are all set to kind of change to the same bass note, but again they've got different offsets. So the offset chord at the bottom there is different to the follow chord at the top, so it just lets me create some quite sort of dynamic things between them. rest of patches on. Boom. Anyway, that's that. So we'll move on to the next one. We're halfway. We're more than halfway from the top, just saying. 6. So on this one, what I was trying to sort of get across is sometimes it's nice to completely leave a drum empty. Whilst designing this, I've kind of gone overboard on it so many times, and sometimes the nicer, more musical option is to leave quite a few surfaces just as drums and be quite sort of careful about where you place things. I think it's probably quite important to let the style of the song inform the placement of the triggers rather than the other way around. You don't want to have stuff just for the sake of it. Less is more, as I say. So on this one, I've got a little synthesizer just on the rim, which gives me a complete playing surface just acoustically. Got some chords and a single note there. And this is the quite cool riff function we had. So that's 2 different groupings of 8 notes. See the track playing at the bottom there. And if I hit it before it completes, it'll restart it. So I've got a refill trick on here, which is basically letting me put different notes into the riff. So riffs can be refilled ad hoc, so you can kind of replace the data in that dynamically whilst you're playing, which is quite fun. Right, on to the next one. Example 7. It's not the riff machine. But on this one, I put the MIDI CCs on there. So the idea on this one is I'm trying to get across the point that you can control other dynamics other than just notes. You can control. So each time I'm playing it, it's kind of different cuts off. And you can set that again dynamically off the CC page if you wish. So on this one, I've got reverb and effects control on that as well, so I can kind of hit that and add that kind of beat crush reverb. Take it off again. And on this one, I've got it so as I play harder, the note decays longer. be a clap, but apparently it's not a clap. That's all. Moving on. Example 8 time. So I hope this is kind of giving some reasonable idea of how it all kind of starts to fit together. What have we got on? Oh, so this one, my concept was going back to what we were saying about sometimes it's nice to just have an acoustic kit. So I've layered a lot of things all on this one. So again, you could make a whole performance using every drum, or you could make them just using one and using lots of different layers. So the idea here is small velocities. That should be a flute. I don't know why that's not a flute. Maybe it's because I've got the wrong sound. Try on. That's definitely not a flute, so we'll leave it. But yeah, it basically means dynamically you can switch through with velocity using a rim shot to string the chords, really hard hits to hit like a bass drum, and then kind of a chord pattern on bass, and then something more melodic at the top end. So, moving on. Example 9. Remember, we're only going up to 10, so we are getting there. What we've got there, I've just started to kind of introduce a few more drum elements back into the drumming, because you could use this without any of the melody and just have a really intensive drum workout. It's just because I play it mainly in an acoustic environment that I mainly use the synths, but you can apply all of the layer splits, velocities, velocity scaling, random probabilities. You can apply all that to this. So I've got it to when you're very quiet, it's just, well, it's supposed to be a hi-hat, but we'll go for a ride, it's fine. 10. I've tried to bring it all together in sort of one long continuous thing there. So what we've got is two versions. So we're using the layer mute trig, which is the one I was saying that's quite complicated for adding new channels, taking them away and so on. I've got that on this instrument here. So, single instrument on the first version, and then when I hit the layer mute, we should have two instruments on those two. It came at the wrong time. So anyway, those are my 10 examples. So, just going through some other uses, because obviously you can use it on acoustic kits with piezo triggers, you can use it on electric kits, probably easier if you've just got USBs and so on, it'll just plug straight through. It'll work with anything that has a USB or a MIDI out, like for people who want to do NPC style, like chilled hip-hop drumming, you could use that and augment, rather than having to use purely samples, you could spread it across a 16-step grid, so you have different instruments on each one, so you could kind of manually choose what to play on a round robin there. Obviously, it can be a companion to regular drum machines, so because it is literally just using an input of MIDI data to advance a step, you could feed it a regular MIDI drum machine input and have it do the melody side, which is different to just using a melodic step sequencer, because if you take a step out of your drum pattern, everything will fall in a different place, so it ends up as quite an interesting way of like discussing rhythm and its relation to melody. And then again, installation and sound art, because any piezo will do, you can kind of feed it anything that can create a signal, and yeah, you could have it so that as you walk along the floor it plays a melody or something like that, just whatever you're sending, as long as you can kind of create a signal and send it through to the MIDI, you could do that. So yeah, some other uses there. Just a quick heads up on where we're heading from here. It's our biggest aspiration to have the ability to have sections, so you could have people who want to write more controlled songs that have more detail in them. I want to be able to do it so these 16 steps aren't the limit of a song, they're just like one component, so we call that parts. So the idea is you'll be able to create a part quite quickly and then step through to the next sequence of everything we said, 16 track lanes of up to 16 steps times 4 pages. So basically you'll be able to construct quite detailed verse, pre-chorus, solo, what have you, and again dynamically switch between them. It's all doable, we just haven't kind of got there yet and haven't thought of a nice way to present it on a grid. Same for patterns and song modes, the idea that you should be able to actually select between full songs on the grid, so that's something that we'll kind of bring in. We've got a few ideas for some more different machine types that we've not quite managed to find an elegant way to code yet. And then, yeah, your idea here, so the idea of tonight is to hopefully get some feedback off you guys. Let anyone who wants to have a go on the kit. We can load up some demo programs and stuff and just kind of have a play, don't be afraid. Even if you're not a drummer, it's fun to just hit things and hear sounds, so feel free. And yeah, with that, I suppose out of the way, do we have any questions?
I like the bit where, like, say the drum would trigger a riff, the kind of strum thing.
Yes.
Does the kit have a way of tracking the BPM which you're playing at, such that the fills will be playing at the BPM?
Interesting concept. The answer is not yet, but yes.
Yeah.
Basically, one of the things that we want to do is quite a lot of more tempo-driven sequencing and all sorts of things. So at the moment, we've kind of reserved a little button. I'm just going to do a full reload because I think we've kind of knackered it out, giving it all these problems to deal with one after the other. Yeah, it's all very, very slow. Well, anyway, basically, at the end of the piano, there was one blank step. My idea at the moment is to have that as something that you can momentarily hold down, and whatever drum you hit, you just kind of give it a count in, and it uses that to set the tempo. So it's something that side of it is definitely doable. That's on its way. That will then feed into the strum. So all the strum things, you've kind of got all the beat divisions going up and down. So the minute we give it, I think there's like a nominal BPM of 80 on most of them. It was just 80 or 90 was kind of where we sort of found that it sat nice for demoing it. But you can at the minute, you can go in and manually set another number if you want it to be a faster or slower thing as the base tempo. Or you can also change the subdivision using the grids. That's a quick way of doing it, as long as you don't mind it being sort of proportional to whatever your base tempo is. You can kind of do it so it's like a fifth of that, or a quarter of that, half of that, or whatever. So quite often sort of changing the division is enough to get you into a wheelhouse. But yeah, I'd like to have the tempo stuff. And I think once we get that nice and kind of baked in, there'll be potentially ways to have one input permanently listening, because I must admit I kind of use my rack tom with hi-hat samples instead of a hi-hat. So if you were doing something like that was constant, you might be able to assign a dynamic tempo tracker as a trig to something that you're going to be hitting constantly. As long as you're hitting it constantly, you would constantly reevaluate that tempo, so you could actually slow down pieces and have it all kind of move in time. The problem that we found when we were testing that was a lot of the drums, because of the nature of drums, you're playing kind of accented hits and things. It's not necessarily absolutely metronomic. You're kind of doing double hits and stuff, which then sends the tempo haywire. So it was useful to have this kind of idea of like locking the tempo on and off, just having like a momentary trigger. Any more questions? What?
First one, sorry if you've already said this, but I'm just curious about what's actually handling the samples.
At the minute, that's all within Core Gadget, which is like an iOS app.
Right.
So it's, I think they do a free version to sort of get you started, which is great. And then you buy individual modules that then sort of plug into it. So it's kind of a mini DAW. It's quite nice. It's sort of halfway between a fully fledged DAW and a sort of sampler groove box sort of thing. So you could just load up every different app separately, but I just find that's when I'm clicking through stuff so quick, it's a nice quick way to iterate between different samples. But yeah, I'd say check it out. We're always getting stuff when they're on sale. They're on sale about half the year, so way well over half price.
So is that taking MIDI data from the...
Yeah, so this is why you're all like waiting around for half an hour. So this normally has a hardwire going to a dock that the iPad sits in, but it kind of fell off the back and broke. So it's now actually sending via Bluetooth, which I was a little bit worried that there would be a latency thing, but so far that seems to be holding up very well. So that might be the bright new future for how I control all this. Any more?
Just one
Yeah,
more
go on.
question. This is to do with the BPM thing as
Yeah.
well. Is there so if you wanted to say if you wanted to have a clip track in your ears, and you wanted to say you had a step sequencer and you wanted some kind of MIDI sync,
Yeah, sure.
is that?
It's not in it yet, purely because the only reason was when you start dealing with incoming clocks, everything has to be dealt with very differently. Everything has to like have a timed event as to when it happens.
Yeah.
At the minute, one of the kind of benefits or one of the unique features of D2MS is like you're the metronome essentially. So we could do that, but that would take. It's a stretch goal. Let's put it that way. It's not something that's unrealistic to say don't do, because I think, to be fair, we built something that might end up as quite an interesting dual-purpose full sequencer, because you could theoretically, if it could deal with its own clock, it would be a sequencer. It's just one of the things where the USB of D2MS was kind of hitting it yourself, so at the minute we've not really bolted that bit on yet. But cool, thank you. Any more? Go on.
Hey,
Hello.
you said MEPs that will do.
Yeah.
Does that apply to like melodic instruments? Like, can it track notes?
That's kind of a little bit down to the translation. Sorry, for clarity, there is a separate translation happening here. I use a little drum inbox, which is it's by a company called Audiophone. So that's taking piezo and turning it into MIDI. So that's kind of separate to our thing. But we are again a sort of a V2 stretch goal. The Norms itself does have normal stereo input, so there's no reason to suspect without a bit of finagling we can't have two piezo pickups coming in directly without any more translation and actually translating it locally on Norms itself, which it's doable, we just haven't quite thought of it yet. So to answer the question, yeah, if you had an instrument or like your voice or something like that and you wanted to, as long as it could track transients and spit out MIDI at transient points, you could feed that more or less anything. It just really depends on what you're feeding it. So yeah, potentially. Any more? Cool. Okay, that's great. Well, I think in that case we'll move to the Let's Play thing. So if anyone wants to come up, we'll take a little bit of a break sort of time. People can just mill around and refresh their drinks if you've brought any or whatever, and come up and we'll have a go, because that's kind of what it's all about. Is I want people to play with it, enjoy it, and then give me feedback on what else we should be adding in. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.